Hi guys, and welcome back to World of Tanks, and I'm going to be looking at, well, the second one, or, this is the one I'm going to be looking at second, should I say, of the Predator tanks, or the whatever they've called it, the Robitier, anyway. The Beast tanks, basically. You've got the Scorpion G, the Mutts, and the M46 KR, the M46 Patton KR, or the Ripper Patton. To give it its other name. Now, one of the things that most people complain about on the Sherman Ripper is the paint job. They think it looks ugly, but I just console myself that when you're driving it from the back, you cannot see the paint job. Well, that's one of the things anyway. The other thing is that the gun is pretty poor. So, we've now got another tank with that lovely paint job. Now, I know this is very accurate. You can actually find pictures on the internet of this very tank with this paint job on it, sort of thing, from Korea. But I don't know. I don't like the way it looks. It doesn't bother me enough to not sort of, if I was going to buy this tank, it wouldn't bother me enough not to buy it. I don't like it, but, it is what it is. It doesn't affect the way the tank plays or anything else, and well, again, you can't really see it from the back. You just get a bit of the tiger print on the turret there. Now, although it is, I suppose, technically a reskin of a Tech Tree tank, because obviously we have the M46 Patton at tier 9, it is slightly different and seems to have more in common with the Pershing at tier 8, hence why I've got this here, than the Patton at tier 9 in a lot of ways. I believe the tier 9 Patton gets 102 on the front of its turret. Where are we? M46 Patton. Stock turret 102, fully upgraded turret 102. Now, if we look at its stock, I don't know if it's got that sort of trolley thick strip across the front. Nope, not on the stock turret, so yeah, not sure about that. But it's very in between, and obviously it does share a lot with the Pershing because it was the successor to the Pershing, but it does seem very in between sort of a Pershing and a sort of, I say, not stock, but the M46 Patton. So let's have a look at it. It's basically got a 90mm gun, 810 horsepower, so it is a bigger engine than on the Pershing, and it does get a better power to weight ratio, obviously going along with that. You get a slightly better rate of fire on this than you do on the 90mm on the Pershing at 7.41. Not by much, I think it's something like 7.32 on that. But it's not as good as it is on the tier 9 Patton with the 90mm, which is, slightly better than this. Not quite as good aiming time or accuracy either, I don't think. 2.5 and 0.38, although I will check on that now. I was going to say in a minute, but I'll check on that now. The Pershing with the 90mm gun, 2.3 and 0.37, so yeah, not quite as good, but like I say, as you can see there, it's 7.32, so it's slightly worse on the aiming time. And obviously it's not as good as it is on the other Patton at tier 9. Now, the gun is slightly different again. You get 192 pen instead of 190 with the Pershing, and I think it's 190 on the 90mm on the Patton at tier 9 as well. Sorry, a lot of reviews I'm doing at the moment, getting a bit mixed up in there. Now, your premium ammo though is 243, which is less than the premium ammo on the Pershing, which is about 268, I think it is. Still the same damage on that 90mm 240, which is pretty standard. And then you've got 45 320 on your HE rounds. I've already mentioned about the aim time and the accuracy, which is slightly worse than the 90mm on the Pershing and the tier 9 Patton. Now, hull traverse 38 degrees. Again, that is, it's kind of in the middle. It's basically the same as the Pershing, again slightly worse than the tier 9 Patton. Same with the turret traverse, I think it is at 38, same as the Pershing, but the turret on this gets 127 on the front, so it is kind of different. 390 meter view range, which is less than the Pershing and less than the Patton. I think that gets 410 when it's fully upgraded and starts with about 400, and I think the Pershing even gets 400, but you've got a 745 meter view range. In fact, I will check on the Pershing, because I'd like to get it right. So yeah, same traverse speeds as the Pershing, more armor on the back of the turret than the Pershing, and it does get less view range than the Pershing. And let me just check that it is right with the Patton as well, because I'd like to give you all the information I can. And let's go fully upgraded, well, fully upgraded with the 90mm, 38 and 40, no, so that is the same. So yeah, it does get less view range, but it's got the same hull traverse but less turret traverse than the Tier 9 version of the Patton. Now the reason I've got the Vengeance in here is because, again, it's kind of comparable to that in some ways. The gun is basically the same as it is on the Vengeance, apart from the Vengeance gets better accuracy and a better aiming time and a slightly better rate of fire. Yeah, so you might be thinking, well, why do I want the Patton and not just get the Vengeance? I don't know. I kind of prefer the Patton over the Vengeance personally, even though the Vengeance does have the better traverses. This has got a better engine, and the armour profiles are very similar, but this has more on the hull, and I think it does have a bit more on the turret, although they both have that very trolley bit right across the middle of the gun mantle. Supplies wise, well, it's 90mm, so quite cheap. 255 for your standard armour piercing, 4,400, which are not so cheap for your APCR, and 255 again for your HE. I've been very boring on the consumables I normally are on these preview ones, and equipment, well, I've gone for my standard medium tank sort of setup, vertical stabiliser, gun rammer and coated optics, especially as well because this does have slightly less view range. My crew is the one out of the my M103, so I probably wouldn't have track mechanic on here, but I would have repairs, I would have situational awareness, brothers in arms, which I would also put on the Scorpion, by the way, and I forgot to mention. Possibly not go for clutch braking as yet, and maybe go for off-road driving possibly. Maybe even smooth ride. One thing this is very, very good at is firing on the move. Brilliant at it, actually. Very impressed with that. And while you're moving, just, you know, sort of driving forward, your dispersion on your aiming circle is very minimal as well when you're sort of, you know, looking through your tank. Obviously it affects it more in sniper mode, but what doesn't. But yeah, very impressed with its ability to fire on the move. But apart from that, it is a very average tank, and I don't mean that in a bad way. It's kind of like the Pershing. The Pershing is very average, but not in a bad way, if you see what I mean. It doesn't really excel at anything or stand out, but it's just a very good, solid medium tank. You know, very capable. But like I say, it doesn't really excel in any particular area. It doesn't really fail in any particular area either. It's just very, you know, like I say, just a solid medium tank. And so is this. It just feels like quite a solid medium tank, but it does have that added bonus of being very good at firing on the move. Now again, does see up to tier 10, and as we go into the modules, I'll give you its bonuses as well, which are 57% silver and 15% XP, and its standard, well, its listed Tankopedia price is 8,700 gold with 1450 hit points as well. But again, this is probably the one I was least looking forward to, but I have really enjoyed it, and it, you know, it's actually surprised me, and I think I may have been quite unfair to it. But again, it doesn't, apart from the firing on the move, it doesn't seem to excel in any area particularly, but just all makes a nice package that's just a good solid medium tank. Your power to weight ratio again is better than it is on the Pershing because you get the bigger engine that you do in the Tier 9 Patton, so you get a power to weight ratio of 18.45. Forward top speed of 48.3 kilometers an hour, which is, again, you know, it's enough, it's kind of average, in the middle sort of thing. 20 in reverse and a 20% chance of fire, with quite a large engine taking up most of the rear of the tank. Concealment as well, by the way, obviously is slightly better because of the perma camo. 0.26 stationary, 0.21 on the move, which is slightly worse stationary than the Vengeance. Now the gun, you get 20 degrees of elevation, quite workable, and a very good 10 degrees of, well, minus 10 degrees of gun depression as well. So, like most American tanks, very good on the ridge lines, and you know, is good or better in hull down sort of situations, but especially when using the ridge lines as well. Track wise, terrain resistance is slightly poorer than a Pershing at 1.3, 1.5 and 2.5, and there are a few gaps in there to shoot through as well. Turrets on top. Radio is in the back in the bustle, which is very common again with the American tanks. Ammo locations, basically one large block right down in the centre of the tank on the hull floor, so you're going to have to go through the tracks to get that one, unless you're shooting at the left hand side of the tank. And then there is a smaller one roughly under the middle of the turret, just above the tracks. Crew members, well, you've got 3 crammed into the turret, the commander under his cupola, gunner and loader, and then down in the hull you've got the hull machine gunner and the driver himself. Now, I did forget to mention nearly shell velocity, slightly low on your armor piercing at 853 meters, but again quite average on your APCR at 1021 meters. Armor wise, more or less identical sort of armor profile to the Pershing. So you've got 102 on the front of the hull, 127 on the front of the turret, and then 76 on the sides of the hull and the turret, 51 on the rear of the hull, and 76 on the rear of the turret, which is, again, like I mentioned before, slightly better than the Pershing. And the 127 is actually better than the base value on the Tier 9 Patton. So 1 to 20 tracks, and just a rear portion of the hull floor fall into that bracket. 21 to 30, the front of the hull floor. It looks like, yeah, just those underhang bits on the front there, just sort of overhanging on the tracks. The top of the turret, top of the commander's hatch, and the engine deck, and that lower bit at the front as well, that flatter part. 31 to 50, it is the front part of the top deck and the rear portion of the sides of the tank, as well as the rear of the tank itself. Now that's again similar to on the Pershing. You've then got 71 to 90. Well, it's the sides and rear of the turret, the sides of the gun mantle, the rest of the side of the tank, sort of the forward sides, the front 2/3, I would have said, and the lower glacis and machine gun port fall into that bracket. So the machine gun port, don't forget, on the front is a weakness on this and on the Pershing. You've also got, you can just see where that step is on the top of the turret, that flatter part there. So if you're aiming for the commander's hatch, all that bit is a good place to try and pen the turret because it's flatter and thinner. 91 to 120, you've got parts of the gun mantle, the turret cheeks there, the front of the turret ring, and the upper glacis. 121 to 160 is the top and bottom just underneath and above the gun mantle, and again the bottom of the gun mantle and a thin strip running around it, or is that behind it possibly? Just behind it maybe. In fact, yeah, there are some other bits just behind it as well. And then you've got this little surprise, which again is on the Pershing and the Vengeance. Now it says down in the bottom left there that it's, 12 to 203, so I would assume it's 203, but up at the top, under survivability, it says up to 140, so I don't know where the 140 figure comes from. Tankopedia, it says 127, which is basically down here. But yeah, so not sure, but I would tend to go with the one down on the bottom left, seeing as it is at least 191 millimeters, so you do have that nice little surprise across your gun mantle, which again is very good when you are using that gun depression. And I'll try and give a few more bits and bobs in the replays itself, but like I say, it's kind of average. Doesn't really excel at anything apart from firing on the move, and just sort of comes together to make quite a solid medium tank. But yeah, let's get into the replays and see how it actually handles. Right, so here we are for the first of the replays, Tier 8 match. Don't forget this does see up to Tier 10, and this is the last time I'm going to say it, but it's for the benefit of people that skip the garage part. This is very good at firing on the move. So yeah, I'm not going to say that again before it turns into a drinking game. But other than that, it's quite average, but not in a bad way. And it just sort of, like the Pershing, it doesn't really excel at anything apart from things I've prior mentioned. There you go, avoided it. And but it doesn't really fail in any sort of particular area. It's kind of just, like I say, just a good solid medium tank. I don't know. I mean, I suppose some people may call it a bit boring, and I don't know. It's not boring as such, but yeah, it's just a very solid, sort of average, medium, just decent medium sort of thing. But like I said in the Scorpion review, the Scorpion, I love it. Personally, I really do enjoy that tank. I am definitely getting that one. Depending on how I get on with the mutts, whether I like that or not, will depend on whether I just buy the Scorpion or do just fork out for the bundle. Because although I do like this tank, and yeah, I think it's very capable, very solid, it doesn't sort of it doesn't excite me, if you see what I mean. It's like, I don't, yeah, like I say, I don't know, it's difficult to describe. But yeah, it is solid. I mean, it's like I mentioned before. It's got better or sort of slightly stronger turret armor seemingly than the M46 Patton that's in the tech tree at tier 9. Yeah, this is very clumsy, by the way, and yeah, something else, and another reason why I've used this match, because it's not a brilliant match, and I'm a bit clumsy in part of it, and you might have already noticed already a couple of things. One, the reload is wrong from what it should be, and I have no sixth sense, and it's because when I get loaned these tanks, I get a 50% no skill crew put in it, so I put one of my own crews in there, and I forgot to do this. So this is my first match in the Patton with a 50% no skill crew, but I did okay. A bit clumsy in parts, and I think I got very impatient and lost my temper a little bit there, so I went straight over, tried to keep him in between me for a bit of cover, but yeah, I'd just had enough at that sort of point. That was a poor shot, went for the lower glacis, really shouldn't have done, probably should have gone for the top deck, so that was a bit of a stupid shot there, but never mind. But yeah, that's why I've used this one, because I do alright in it, despite the fact I've got a 50% no skill crew. It's not too savage, so I thought I'd show it, just to show you that it, you know, it is just a good solid medium. Like I said before, the M46 Tech Tree Patton gets 102 on the front of its turret. This has 127, 102 on the front of the turret hull. Sorry, and you know, the hull, the upper glacis, can bounce a few shots. Mostly from lower tiers, or sometimes same sort of tier mediums at a distance, but it's best not to rely on it. When you are using the very good minus 10 degrees gun depression though, you can bounce quite a few off there, but like I said before, be very careful. The machine gun port is a weak spot, so if anybody is in one of these using gun depression over a ridge but you can see that machine gun port, that's probably the place you want to try and go for. Unless you can see the lower glacis. But yeah, it does have that sort of quite trolly gun mantle on there as well, with the sort of 203, I think it is, something like that. It sort of shows in the armor viewer. Now I had to burn my repair kit earlier because I've not got any skills, so I've got no repair and I need to get out of there. Because Artie were, well, I think it was Artie and a couple of other things interested in killing me. So at the moment I am having to deal with a damaged gun, which is unfortunate, but it's not going too bad. Tried to angle a bit against the AT, took a bit too long, did take a bit of a hit in return there. But now I'm using this rise and he was bouncing. That was a lucky miss. I think he was going for my commander's hatch. But now it's just a case of closing in. And I think with this tank, anybody who's been through the American medium line, who's been through the Pershing, is going to know what I mean, where it sort of doesn't excel and it just is kind of average, but not in a bad way. And so, you know, it is a very capable tank. However, this, I've not done as well in this, nowhere near as well in this as I have done in the Scorpion, even though that's got no armour. And this does struggle a bit in tier 10 matches, a bit like the Pershing can do. But at least with the Pershing you've got 268 on your premium ammo to fall back on. With this you don't, it's about 243 I think I said it was. So yeah, you really are going to have to, in your higher tier matches when you're bottom tier, you're going to have to use its manoeuvrability to try and get around the flanks of the enemy tanks, try and go for weak spots if you can't, but otherwise you're going to have to try and use the terrain, work your way around the flanks of them and get your shots in that way. But you can do that, and again, use the terrain, use the ridges, use any knoll or hillock or whatever you want to call it, anything you can find to try and use that gun depression and put it to work, because that's when this is most effective. Well, it's when the armour is most effective, should I say. Not the gun, but it's you know, it can flank, it can, like I say, it sort of average, but not in a bad way. But like I said before, this is probably the one, even though I do enjoy it and I think it's a decent tank, it's just not particularly exciting, and you know, I've got the Vengeance, which is very similar. It doesn't have quite as much armour, and obviously with the setup with the engine and the terrain resistances, it is slightly different, a bit sluggish to get going, but it's faster when it does. I've also got the Pershing as well, so it's, like I said before, if I'm not interested in the mutts, or, you know, I'm okay on the mutts, you know, but I'm a bit iffy, it'll just be the Scorpion I go for. But if I was going to get the Scorpion and the mutts, I might as well just chuck this in as well, because it is enjoyable. But yeah, it's, you know, that wasn't a bad round really for, like I say, 50% no skilled crew. It didn't work out too bad, and do you know what I mean? Even though it wasn't an outstanding round, if it was a bad tank, you couldn't really do that, you know. You'd really sort of struggle, and, you know, I was a bit clumsy a couple of points there as well. But anyway, moving on to the next match. And again with this one, I have been in a few tier 10s in this. But generally the matchmaking has been very, very good, and it's mostly been tier 8 matches, the odd tier 9 and a couple of tier 10s, and they were horrible tier 10s. It was like over half the team were tier 10, the rest were tier 9s, and like 2 or 3 tier 8s at the bottom, me being one of them, and that is a bit of a struggle. Like I said before, in the tier 10 matches, you've just got to stay back, try and provide support, try and work the flanks as much as possible, get around things. But with this having that slightly lower view range, it doesn't help. But if you've got situational awareness and coated optics on it, you know, it will kind of make up for that a bit. It's not too savage, it's not as though you've lost sort of 50 metres. You've lost 10 over the Pershing and 20 from the Tech Tree Patton, but don't forget that is a tier higher. But this does, I don't know, it does just feel like a slightly improved Pershing. So again, like I said before, anybody that's been through that line, you know exactly what you're going to be getting with this tank. But I'm not sure that really that extra 2 pen on the standard ammo, I don't know why they've dropped so much pen on the premium ammo. I think that has made it a lot more difficult in tier 10 matches, because even though 243, you know, it's a decent enough pen, sometimes it's not quite enough, you know, for those times where you really just can't get around the side of things. But yeah, that's a fair old whack to lose, sort of, you know, 268 down to 243. It's a fair chunk of sort of pen value there. But back to this match now. These two guys over there give us a bit of bother. I'm trying to kind of side scrape slightly. Didn't quite work. Took a hit there. I don't know if I've just got the angle wrong, or I don't think I'm far enough forward actually. I think I'm exposing the front of my tank. In fact, I probably am looking back at this. But I'm just, well, he keeps popping backwards and forwards. He's taken a couple of hits though, and I think he decides that that's basically enough. I didn't mean to knock him there. I just wanted to get up here and try and get a bit of height on these guys, see if that makes a difference. And what we got coming across there. But this is, it's very typical sort of standard American medium gameplay. In a way, it's you know, there's nothing so much different about this, like with the Scorpion. Again, can't comment on the mutts. The Scorpion is fairly different gameplay. You know, it's a fast turreted glass cannon TD. I suppose, you know, you kind of have got a couple of those with the, you know, you've got the E25, you've got the Kanonen Jagdpanzer in the German sort of, not so much in the tree, well, the E25 is, but yeah, you've got those with the Germans. But they're kind of different. They are stealthy, they are fast, they are glass cannons. But they're a lot more stealthy, and they are lower damage guns with a high rate of fire. Obviously the E25 is like a little pop gun, and the Rheinmetall has a 90mm, whereas, you know, that is something bigger. So, you know, that is a bit different. With this, it is pretty sort of stock American medium tank gameplay. But that's kind of nice. It's kind of familiar. It's one of those tanks that a lot of people would be able to, you know, if they did pick this up, And again, I'm not trying to sell these to you. I'm just, you know, giving you my opinions on them, and there's nothing wrong with this tank. The tank itself, I mean, it's fugly. You know, I really don't like the paint job on it. And there is the argument that it is just kind of, you know, a Tech Tree reskin, but the tank itself is not a bad tank, and it's, like I said, anybody that's, you know, a lot of people would be able to pick this up, get this tank, and be able to do well in it, because a lot of people have been through the American tanks, American mediums, and, you know, they sort of know what they're doing with them. And I'm just working on this IS-3. I'm not having much, well, I wasn't having much luck with the AP, and I want to get rid of him. So I just swapped to my PCR, fired a couple of rounds into him, switch back to armour piercing again. And yeah, I do apologise for going on about the Scorpion a little bit. So I was just comparing and talking about them as premiums as well as just tanks. Because I know I've said before, and there's, you know, there's been a few recently where I've said the tank itself is not a bad tank, but it shouldn't be a premium sort of thing. And I don't know. I don't feel as much of that with this one. You know, it is a good tank itself. As for its sort of status as a premium tank, I do kind of feel it's just a bit of a reskin again. But they are, you know, I think they're sort of two different things. But there you go. Not a bad game, not a brilliant game. Again, sort of an average result. 2,365. Only a second class mastery, and I actually get more base XP here than I did for the aces in the Scorpion, but I did come out to that with the Confederate, 1,500 assisted and 1,100 blocked as well. Not quite enough for the top of the table, but there you go. The M46 Patton KR. It's almost like a, I don't know, almost like an old pair of slippers or a comfy armchair that's been reupholstered. You know, it's still very familiar, but just looks a bit different. And I think that's probably the best way of describing it. But yeah, you know, not a bad tank. As for it being a premium, not sure, but it's just not quite as exciting, I don't think, as the other two, because it is just something that we've basically already got in game. Another couple of results there for you as well. But anyway, I hope you've enjoyed that. I hope you found it informative, and I'll be back with another video probably tomorrow. So until then, take care out there, and I'll catch you next time. See you later.